Okay, welcome. It's been several weeks since we were in Ephesus with the Apostle Paul and then with the Apostle John, and then we did a few little side trips, but now we're back to Western Turkey, heading up the coast to visually visit some of those very important spots there in Western Asia Minor, what we call Western Turkey. So we're going to go to Pergamum this evening. So let me find those slides for you, and we will be headed off to one very lovely and very interesting city. Okay. Okay. Pergamum, the Sentinel of Asia. A very, very interesting city, founded just shortly after the time of Alexander the Great by one of his generals and some of the people that replaced him. So we're talking around 300 to 200 BC, so in that area. Okay. So we were in Ephesus, which considered itself the most important city in Asia. We bypassed Smyrna for now. We're at Pergamum. Pergamum considered itself the most important city in Asia, kind of a rival with Ephesus. And there were times when the Romans actually got involved in that by naming Pergamum the capital of the province for a time to punish Ephesus for something or other. So kind of a bit of a rivalry between those two cities. Pergamum, as you can see, is a bit inland, but it is so elevated that you can actually see the Aegean from the high points of Pergamum. We are in the modern city of Bergama. You're not surprised to hear that Bergama is kind of a corruption of Pergamum. The ancient city was first on the Acropolis and then overflowed into the valley. Fortunately for us, the Acropolis has not been built over, and so it's very available to us. What was down here was built over. As in so many places, the ancient city is underneath the modern city, but what we're most interested in is up here anyway. You can see we'll be up there. You can see those two pine trees. We'll be up there in just a moment. And here we are, partway up the Acropolis. You can see the foundation here of a very, very large, very historic installation here on the Acropolis of Pergamum. This goes back a long time before the time of the Apostle John and the Apostle Paul. A very great altar to Zeus here, the head of the Olympian pantheon. So very much the classic pagan Greek place of worship here. And the altar itself was excavated, disassembled, and reassembled some years ago in Berlin. And this is, in fact, the altar from Pergamum. And now you can tell that the person who wrote this article for BAR, Biblical Archaeology Review, thinks that the Apostle John, when he refers to the throne of Satan at Pergamum, was in fact referring to this altar to Zeus. And we are looking at Revelation chapter 2, where Jesus says, "To the angel of the church in Pergamum write, these things says the one who has the sharp sword with two edges. I know your works and where you dwell, where Satan's throne is. Yet you hold fast my name and have not denied the faith, even in those days wherein Antipas, my faithful witness, who was slain among you where Satan dwelleth." So one possibility there about the stronghold of Satan would be that pagan classic worship of the Olympian gods, and the altar that was part of that pagan classical worship. There is another possibility too, that John is referring to something else, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Meanwhile, we'll head on up the hill here. You can, this built originally in the latter part of the Greek era, but then built up and expanded during the Roman era. And the Romans loved those barrel vault arches. They did that particularly if the top of the hill was a little small and they wanted to build a really massive temple to the gods or to the Roman emperor. A way of extending the top of the hill was to build all these barrel vaults and then just some fill on top. They could make a larger flat space. They did that here in Pergamum. They did it, Domitian did it at Ephesus. We saw that a few weeks ago. Herod did it in Jerusalem. The Temple Mount was expanded, very much in that same technique. So every proper Greek city or Hellenistic city, Hellenism being the last era of the Greek history, 300 BC, 200 BC, before the Romans really took over this area. Every proper Greek city or Hellenistic city had to have a temple to one of the pagan gods, had to have a theater, we'll be there in a few minutes, had to have a gymnasium with a public baths usually, and every proper Greek city had those. A few Greek cities would also have a library, and Pergamum was one of those cities that had their own library. It was right here. You might remember that the Great Library of Alexandria, founded about 300 BC, which is about the time that the city of Pergamum was being founded. By about 198 BC, the leadership of Pergamum built their own library and began to build up their collection of scrolls and built it up to the point where it was actually beginning to rival the Great Library in Alexandria. In fact, there's a kind of a legend that the folks in Egypt were not happy about this growing library up here in Asia Minor, and so they cut off the export of papyrus, thinking that might curtail the growth of this library. And then the legend goes that in response to that, the people of Pergamum developed parchment, far superior form for scrolls in a library. And in fact, our English word parchment does come from the word Pergamum. A little hard to see in English, but nonetheless true. So it's a great legend, and there might be some truth to it, but it is not the invention of parchment at this time, because we have parchment prior to this library. So they may have ramped up the use of parchment and the development of parchment, but they were not the original inventors of it. Might be worth saying that technically parchment refers to skins that have been prepared from sheep or goats. Vellum refers to writing skins that have been prepared from calves. Think veal, okay? And these natural skins can be treated with, in one direction, of tanning, making them stronger, or for use as leather, or with a slightly different chemical composition and handling, made into high-quality parchment or vellum, which is a phenomenal step forward from papyrus in terms of its consistency and durability. But this library was a very, very large library, very significant library, growing library, beginning to threaten the library of Alexandria for the great library of the ancient world. Cleopatra, who you may have heard of, who was queen of Egypt at this time, got a little nervous about this. So about 40 BC, she said to her friend Mark Antony, maybe it would be good if you would go up there with a squad of Roman soldiers and just steal all the volumes from Pergamum and bring them down to us here in Alexandria. And he said, yes, dear, whatever you think, dear. And so for her birthday present, he stole all the scrolls here from Pergamum and brought them to Alexandria, where they could then be destroyed in due time when the whole library of Alexandria was destroyed. Lots of sad events in the ancient world. Okay, I mentioned that every proper Greek city had a theater. This is the steepest theater in the Greek world. It's steep because the Greeks worked with the environment, and this happened to be a steep hill. We should say a little bit about theater, the role of theater. We think of theater as a kind of a luxury item for wealthy people, occasionally on a Friday evening. Not the way the Greeks thought about theater. We stood in the theater in Philippi some years ago, and our Greek guide talked about the role of theater in the classical world. Theater was early in the morning when it's cool and people's minds are fresh. Theater was for everyone in the community. And those who couldn't afford the tickets, there were ways that they would be provided. The role of theater was to draw the community together, to portray some important dynamics of life or historical events or the result of loyalty or the result of treachery, so that we see, portrayed some of the very things that we struggle with, and we see how those will lead out, and it was to form the community. And then she talked about how when the classical world disappeared, ancient theater died out for a time. And then she said, when you think about the whole community gathering together early in the morning, maybe early in the week, to have its values and its thinking formed by drama, what do you think of? Some wise person said, I think of Sunday morning worship. And she said, exactly. Classical theater died when the ancient world died, but it was reborn in the Byzantine Church, where the great drama of redemption is played out every Sunday morning when the whole community is gathered together in the cool of the morning, in the early part of the week, to have our perceptions and our perspectives shaped and deepened by what we see unpacked before us in a very visual and dramatic way. Think about that. Okay. Pergamum had some phenomenal marble. I'll give you a little bit close up of these columns. You can see these columns are not fluted. They're not fluted because their marble was so incredibly beautiful with these natural grains that much of the classical work here was just left. Very, very, very beautiful, very lovely marble. Later, of course, the Romans came along and fluted just because they wanted to do that. This is later Roman stuff. This would be after the time of the Apostle John. Romans loved their arches. We saw some of these barrel vaults earlier. Romans loved their arches, and in fact, you'll occasionally run across a historian who will say that the Romans invented the arch or developed the arch. Don't say that around your Greek friends, because they'll go ballistic, because they have very clear examples of Greek arches that way predate the Roman era. The Greeks tended to use a post and lintel because they preferred it, but they knew the arch, and they did use it occasionally. Think of the arch at ancient Olympia, for example. But nonetheless, the Romans did love the arch, and they used it a lot, and did a lot of great things with it. So this is a Roman emperor. This is a little bit after the time of John, this particular statue, but this shows you, this is what we call the imperial cult, which is very strong in Pergamum, a very strong trend in Pergamum to honor the empire, to actually sacrifice to the emperor, to pray to the emperor, and so forth. This may actually be what John is referring to in Revelation when he talks about the throne of Satan in Pergamum. By the time John's writing in the late 1st century AD, Zeus is not that much of an issue, but the Roman Empire and the claims of the Roman emperor to be divine, that was very much an issue. Thought you should have a little bit of beautiful relief here. These poppies, daisies. Actually, these are probably anemone, which in Turkey is pronounced anemone. And then one last look at that great Acropolis. So, okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and I hope that if you read Revelation chapter 2, you get a little bit more visual of that great city of Pergamum, and enjoy, keep on studying that ancient history along with your New Testament, and enjoy life. Thanks for joining us.